welcome back to Tablet Tuesday, the podcast where we explore the science, innovation, and people shaping the future of health and nutrition. Today's guest is somebody who's helping raise the scientific standard of the supplement industry. Harry Jarrett is the Director of Science and Research at Heights, where he leads clinical research, publishes peer-reviewed studies, and champions evidence-based nutrition. Before joining Heights, Harry built his career across academia and NHS clinical research, giving him a unique perspective on how science can move beyond the lab and make a real difference in people's health. In today's episode, we're diving into everything from micronutrient deficiencies, public health to GLP-1s, evidence-based supplements, and the future of nutrition science, and why the collaboration between academia and industry could shape the next generation of innovation. Harry, welcome to Tablet Tuesday.
Thank you so much for the invite, Emily. Super excited to kind of talk about everything you've just mentioned.
Thank you so much. Harry, for those who have not come across your work before, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the journey that led you to become the Director of Science and Research at Heights.
Gosh, where to start? So I did my undergraduate master's degrees at the University of Exeter. And it's really during my master's degree that I fell in love with the power of nutrition for physical health, but also our mental and brain health as well. So following my MSc, I went for a fully funded PhD at Ulster University with Professors Mary Ward and Helene McNulty, really focused on B vitamins, so like folate, B12, B6 and riboflavin, and really how these can impact our health, particularly relating to blood pressure. And following that, completed the PhD, and this was back in the COVID-19 pandemic, which when I was speaking to my colleagues the other day, it feels like it was
long time ago,
like decades ago. And I picked up so much lab experience during my PhD that I actually transitioned back to London and became the COVID-19 research laboratory coordinator for Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust here in London, where basically we're working on the phase 1 to phase 3 clinical trials of the novel new COVID vaccines. And I was basically in charge of leading those laboratories for those clinical trials. So some of the vaccines had never been dosed in humans before. So it's a really kind of novel insight into pharmaceutical grade clinical research. And I did that for nearly 3 years. And as obviously the funding comes with licensing vaccines, the funding sort of started to reduce. And I decided it was my time to return back to my passion of nutrition. And I was looking back at my career and thought, okay, I've got the academic experience and I've got the robust clinical trial pharmaceutical grade experience. The only other thing I haven't done is industry work. So I started looking around just different nutritional industries and wanted to work in a supplement company, interviewed for various different supplement companies. Won't name names apart from obviously Heights because I'm here. And I just fell in love with their mission. I just looked at their website. They had some, robust science, and put a job application in, just thinking, how's that going to land with industry and what's the industry going to be like? And fell in love with their mission, met the founders, and was like, this company is really built from the ground up in science, and I want to be a part of it. And fortunately, they gave me a job, and I am now being Director of Science and Research for just over 2 years now within the company. So that's kind of like my whirlwind, quick whistle stop tour of my career today.
No, thanks for sharing that. And as you've mentioned there, obviously you've worked in academia and clinical research, and now you've got that direct nutraceutical industry experience. What lessons have you taken from each of those experiences?
Yeah, so I think that's what makes my career trajectory and my experience and knowledge so unique. It's because I've worked across 3 completely different industries, but each have their pros and cons. So academia taught me the real life importance of grounding your hypotheses in scientific research. So going back to the textbooks, going back to the academic papers, and actually reading the biochemistry, the biochemical pathways that you think is going to inform your hypothesis. Made a few errors back in my early PhDs. I'm not doing that. So academia taught me the scientific rigor and the importance of hypothesis generation, and also how to apply for grant application to actually get funding to do your research. The work on the NHS at GSTT here in London really taught me the importance of governance and what we refer to on the NHS and within clinical trials as good clinical practice, GCP, and making sure everything's documented, every adverse reaction is documented, and everything is done within the pharmaceutical companies like remit as well. So, those two then went on to inform my role here within industry, where this role provides various benefits to over the clinical research and the academic research, which mainly is the speed in which we can run trials is much, much quicker. There is so much red tape on the NHS, to be perfectly honest, and in academia to get a trial up and running. One vaccine trial we're working on a year and a half to get the governance and the ethics approved by to get it up and running, whereas we can run trials within that time frame on the within industry. So, but the problem again with the industry is it can be quick and fast. There's not as much red tape, but sometimes that red tape is there for a reason as well. So it's really using that my experience within academia and NHS clinical research as guardrails into how we run the industry side research to make sure it's ethical and scientifically robust, but also we can do it at pace, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And it seems from the conversations that we just had and that we've previously had that you thoroughly enjoy actually that clinical research and understanding and the trials and the academia side of the market. So what was it about Heights that convinced you to make that move into industry?
Yeah, I think it was a hard choice because I was at one of the best trusts in the UK, Guys and St Thomas's, and was in a full-time permanent role on a good banding, and was managing a team of 5 and a great team around me, and great support. So it took a lot to make me move, but it's really listening to the founders and their story of why they set up Heights, along with throughout the interview process and throughout doing my own sort of independent research on the company, and discussing with colleagues. It is grounded in science. Science is like the ethos of the company. So even when I first joined, it's like the founders are so passionate about science, and they're willing to invest quite substantial funds in helping secure RCTs or our parliamentary work we're doing. They're very open to supporting that. And when I first joined Heights, everyone within the company, it's not just at the founder level, everyone is so enthusiastic and passionate about science. Actually, quite a lot of our company team members know a lot about science as well. They read up on it on their own time. So it's really nice being within an ecosystem of people that actually fundamentally enjoy science, which is fed throughout the business. And having the company grounded in science and clearly a real science ethos. And also it's not developing supplements for marketing purposes. It's actually developing supplements the company believes will have the intended health impact it wants to improve the health of our population is really what kind of drove me to the company.
For those who are unfamiliar with the company, what is the mission behind Heights? And I guess what makes it different from other supplement brands?
Yeah, so Heights, really the overarching aim of Heights is to improve our population health by improving our nutritional status. So the power of nutrition being used to improve our population health. So that's our overarching aim. So Heights, for anyone that doesn't know, it has a multivitamin called Vitals, a probiotic called Biotic. There are two sort of main products, and the multivitamin, 20 individual nutritional compounds. It was developed to help correct different micronutrient deficiencies we see across the UK. So really that's the science kind of our overarching aim in one statement is to improve Heights' overarching aim, one statement, is to improve the health of our population through the power of nutrition. And I guess what makes Heights different was at the end of that, it's really the science. I might be biased because I'm the director of the function, but it really is the science. So my role at Heights stems across the whole company. So product development, if we're looking to bring out a new supplement, which I'm looking forward to doing in the beginning of 2027 as well. But if we're looking to develop a supplement, the first port of call is me, and it's not okay, what's trending on Instagram that we can then like put into a supplement and make a rationale for. It actually starts with the science first. So going back to the RCTs and ideally meta-analyses, what compounds have been shown to have an influence on X health effect that we're looking to influence for our population health? So what compound, what form of that compound? So what is the most bioavailable form? What's the optimal dosages? What's the best delivery mechanism? All of that starts from the ground up with me, which is why I can stand by the by the supplements, is because of I've helped to build them. And then it's also one other thing is different about Heights is we're actually standing by those supplements. We're testing how effective they are in the community that are going to purchase that product. So our Vitals randomized control trial is the first UK multivitamin in healthy UK adults. We showed, I think, probably talk about it later, but substantial improvements in various different key nutrient biomarkers, and it's the only company with an RCT in healthy UK adults on a multivitamin. So that's another thing, is actually so developing them scientifically, the supplements, standing by them and actually rigorously testing them at a pharmaceutical grade testing with a randomized control trial. But the third thing that makes Heights a bit different, I think, is yes, the two are kind of company focused, but we're operating at a much higher level than any other supplement company I know of across the globe, really, where we're using our power within industries. Very similar, may I say, to the pharmaceutical industry, where they lobby and they use their power within industry to help influence government positions, like we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's exactly what we're replicating at Heights for the nutraceutical company, which has never happened before. So we have a seat within, which we're talking about, within Parliament, Parliamentary and Scientific Committee. And the whole idea about that is the power of nutrition to improve our health as a population is so underrated across government and across our population. Heights really has a good, strong foothold to improve that, to improve policy with politicians and government initiatives to help improve population health. So we have two elements that are very business focused, but then we also have another element of Heights, which is operating at a much higher level to really that overarching aim of improving our population health by optimizing nutritional status. Is really, we're not just saying it as like a brand, like we're actually showcasing that and operating at that high level to improve the health of our population.
One thing that stood out to me, particularly when doing my own research, and as you've just mentioned there, actually about the science coming first before what's trending on Instagram. Well, at Heights, it seems that the science team operates completely independently from marketing. Why was that important to establish, and what impact does that have on the research you conduct?
Yeah, I think that's really important, and what differentiates Heights from the rest of the industry is, I see firsthand some brands per se, their science team will be informed by the marketing team, and the marketing team wants specific stats or something like that, and the science team will build the science around that. Whereas when I joined Heights, I explicitly wanted that to be not the case, because it seems to be almost the case for quite a few brands. Whereas when I joined Heights, we wanted it to be the science function really essentially acts as its own academic entity within the company, which I think is kind of like reinforced by the plethora of well-renowned academic institutes and learned societies that work with us and are willing to collaborate with us, is because they see that, yes, I'm an industry, Heights is, an industry partner, but their science is almost independent of the company and the marketing team. Of course, like I have a scientific question about a product, I want to answer that, and then any statistics, within our RCT, randomized control trial that we run, or any of my science, the team can then go and use if it's helpful for the business. In all honesty, but it's not engineered the other way, where marketing come to me saying I want this stat for this, and then it's very much done from science into marketing, and it was so fundamentally important because it's my own scientific and academic integrity on the line as well, and being influenced by marketing or other partners within industry would very much damage that reputation that I've built over 10 years. So that was why it's fundamental both for Heights as the company to make sure science was separate to marketing, but also really important for myself to make sure it was as well for my own academic and scientific reputation, if that makes sense.
It absolutely doesn't. And actually, we touched a little bit on the Parliamentary and Scientific Committee. So let's actually go into that. So Heights has obviously become the first consumer health company in Europe, in the whole of Europe, to be on that board. That is such a significant milestone. But what is the main purpose of that, the impact, and what does that mean for you as an organisation?
Yeah, I think for us as an organization, it just shows that, our scientific integrity, credibility, and our standing in the science community through the work that we've been engaging in for multiple years. It's nice to see the recognition of this. So it really allows us a foothold for the first time for the nutraceutical industry. We're the first ever. Yes, we're also there's two ways you can join, and we're actually classed as a scientific organization within the Parliamentary and Scientific Committee. So to like sort of like different universities or scientific organizations, we are also considered a scientific organization within that group. And really what it does is it allows us to have a foothold in Parliament and really drive the power of nutrition to policymakers and politicians and MPs, and really try to get their attention and engage them on what we can be doing at a government and policy level to improve our population health, again, through the power of nutrition. So I just actually published, so that committee holds journal. I think it's every 3 months. They have a journal in called Science in Parliament, which essentially is delivered to every politician MP in electronic and hard copy. And I wrote an article on the extent of hidden micronutrient deficiencies and actually a government call to action to improve policy. So there's very specific policy mandates outlined there that could help improve the levels of nutrients across our UK population, which in turn we know will prevent various different non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular disease and mental health conditions through the power of nutrition. So that was really important for us, and I was ecstatic when we
Yeah.
came. We're actually in discussions with them at the moment about creating a parliamentary reception, a Heights-led parliamentary reception. Again, first time any nutraceutical, real proper industry partner is in there with politicians outlining the problem in the hope that it is taken seriously. And we're very lucky at Heights. We have a very big network of academic collaborators that are world leading in this field that we can lobby and take along with us. Very well respected professors in the field of nutrition, not nutraceuticals, but in nutritional sciences in general, that we can bring with us to be like, this is a real problem. These are experts. It's not just Height saying it. It's actual academic, as I'm an academic, but other scientific and academic partners. So yeah, we actually also just want to give a shout out. We are in Parliament in September, I believe September 12th, with the Pernicious Anemia Society. So Heights is basically we're looking at, within that, we're doing a parliamentary reception there in the House of Commons, and we do quite a lot of work with Pernicious Anemia Society, and we are essentially speaking to politicians and MPs about vitamin B12 deficiency in particularly, and the way that pernicious anemia can lead to B12 deficiencies. And Heights is actually leading the solutions to vitamin B12 deficiency within that parliamentary event. So just a shout out for that. If you Google it, Pernicious Anemia Society Parliamentary Reception, you will see us. And yeah, it's a really cool event as well. So
No, absolutely. And I think it's really important to have a voice there, and it's to finally have some recognition, but at a really serious level, things need to be acknowledged and soon. Just taking into that, if you could influence one major public health policy right now, if you could change it tomorrow, what would it be and why?
that's a really good question. So it's just something I'm very passionate about, so I won't go on for too
Yeah,
long, as
that's
I
okay.
probably will mention. But we can see we're very lucky in the UK. We have a survey called the National Diet and Nutrition Survey, NDNS, which is one of the only companies that routinely surveillances the nutritional health of our population. It's meant to be representative of the UK population. We're seeing a plethora of what we refer to at Heights and within the scientific community of hidden micronutrient deficiencies. The problem is these are in healthy apparently healthy UK adults, that if you took them on a normal clinical routine screening without any biomarkers, you wouldn't know. But it has a potential for underlying diseases later on down the line, such as cardiovascular disease and even some forms like dementia, for instance. So for me, one of the best ways of improving our micronutrient status of our population is through fortification, voluntary but ideally mandatory fortification. So within that article I mentioned that's going to all the MPs and politicians, I give a strong call to really review the policies around our fortification, because it's not working. The NDNS data is showing that our policies are failing our population at the moment, and it's extremely frustrating when you look at the modelling done. And from when the United States implemented their mandatory fortification of flour with folic acid, to 2012, the modelling indicates we could have prevented, if the UK did the same thing at the same rate, based on the US data, across the UK, we could have prevented over 2,000 neurotube defects from the time of implementation to 2012 alone. So these aren't just, sort of small conditions. Neurotube defects like spina bifida, a child can be born stillborn, or, have life-changing conditions, be in some severe cases in a wheelchair for the rest of their lives with a reduced life expectancy. So these are real world impact. These are real world problems, and really a relatively simple solution of fortification to improve the nutritional status of particularly women of childbearing age, particularly red blood cell folate, could have substantial disease prevention. And this is what the case I make to the politicians is, on an individual level, that's 2,000 individuals just when we look at folate alone, that we could have prevented serious diseases with, but it's also the economic cost. Each severe case of neural tube defect, if successful in pregnancy, can cost up to £3 million to society, to the UK's economy, sorry. So, there is the individual level, which, the outcomes of inaction by the government is horrible, to be perfectly honest. And then there's also the economic argument as well, where, if we do fortify with folic acid, then, we could save the NHS a lot of money and the wider economy a lot of money through productivity. I see that the government obviously have now actioned on the scientific evidence for folate with mandatory folic acid fortification of specific flour. But there are a number of different nutrients that we do not want to follow that same path of folate and folic acid that the government has taken in action on for so long, like riboflavin, like vitamin D and so forth. So, that's one thing. Yes, it's a real passion of mine, and obviously why I'm doing the work with Heights to raise this awareness is because at the end of the day, there are real world consequences to this inaction of government.
It absolutely does. And I know that you've recently published this research highlighting the widespread micronutrient deficiency in the UK. Why now should be people pay more attention?
For me, it's just the evidence is continuously growing. I just, with the professors at Oxford University, did my PhD with, we just published a paper in the journal Nutrition, again using that National Diet and Nutrition Survey NDNS data, and we show that, which again is representative of the UK population, and we show that 50% of women of childbearing age in the UK have full-blown riboflavin deficiency, and that's not just intake, that's actually by the riboflavin biomarker, the gold standard erythrocyte glutathione reductase activation coefficient, the ERAC biomarker, which is a functional assay, is gold standard for riboflavin. 50% of women across the UK of childbearing age were deficient. When we look at men, age-matched men, 45% of age-matched men, and actually the most severe cases of deficiency were, I believe, in children aged between 11 and 17. So we're also seeing it in childhood as well. Riboflavin plays a fundamental role across the human body, plays a role in activating vitamin B6, which we know plays an important role itself, activating folate, as we just discussed, is so important, and in energy metabolism, so converting the food in which we eat into energy. So it's such an important nutrient, and we have peer-reviewed evidence in the journal Nutrition just published. I actually presented that in Parliament again for STEM for Britain last year, and it actually won 2 parliamentary awards, and the Nutrition Society Award, but then also it was the first time a nutrition-based project won an overall biomedical award within Parliament. So we picked up 2 awards for that, which I think really drives home the importance and the public health importance of this research we're doing. And then, it's not just, that sort of academic research. We did our scientific study on Vitals, our randomized control trial. And again, we didn't pre-screen people for micronutrient deficiencies. We didn't pre-screen for any disease states. These were healthy UK adults, by all means, healthy UK adults. The only thing was they weren't taking a multivitamin supplement before enrollment. That was really the only main exclusion criteria. And at baseline, we saw substantial amounts of deficiencies across these gold standard biomarkers we ran. So I've actually got the stats here because we run so many studies, but I wrote them down just before coming.
Yeah.
So we had about 40% had full-blown folate deficiency at baseline, 34% had low vitamin B12, and 83% had suboptimal or deficient riboflavin state at baseline. And again, we sent those bloods to the ERAC lab that I used to work with during my PhD. So these are substantially high levels of deficiency, and the knock-on effects. So we also know homocysteine it's a nasty amino acid, and it's very much linked to folate, vitamin B12, riboflavin, B6 levels. So if you have optimal levels of those key B vitamins, normally your homocysteine will likely be in check. But homocysteine is linked to cardiovascular disease, particularly stroke, and we're also seeing now an increased risk of vascular dementia. So it's really important to keep those levels of that nasty amino acid homocysteine down. But in our cohort, healthy UK cohort of adult males and females, 50% of those individuals at baseline had elevated homocysteine concentrations. So it's really showing that it's not just, oh God, we're a bit low on certain nutrients. That's a fundamentally bad thing to have. So many people with elevated homocysteine concentrations, which we know clinically puts them on a life trajectory for an increased risk of various different non-communicable diseases that, could be prevented through simple nutritional interventions. And we actually showed, and this is, something that I'm doing with the Pernicious Anemia Society in Parliament, is it's simple. It's very, very simple. If you have an effective, efficacious intervention, you can just correct these micronutrient deficiencies. So we saw after that Vitals RCT, from those 50% at baseline that had elevated homocysteine, the post-intervention after 3 months, it actually managed to correct all cases of elevated homocysteine. So there were no people compared to placebo. Placebo didn't change. The same people still had elevated homocysteine because that's what you would expect. But in the vitals group, there were no cases of elevated homocysteine. The mean average reduction was about 33%. So we're showing that if you optimize those levels of key nutrients, then you can actually correct these biomarkers that are linked to a number of different diseases, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think the relationship between academia and industry can sometimes be viewed with skepticism. Why do you think that the collaboration between the two is so important? And how do we make sure like great science actually translates into the products that genuinely improves people's lives?
Yeah, I think I actually gave a talk about this at King's on Monday. We co-hosted the NEDPRO conference, and I was asked to talk about the power of academia times industry collaborations, and it's fundamental to the work I do here at Heights. I could not be doing really any of my work. The majority of my work is, like in collaboration with academia. So, I don't have a lab. I don't think anyone, unless pharmaceutical industry, but not in the nutraceutical industry, I would say I don't think any nutraceutical company has their own lab, direct to consumer, has no lab, it has no clinical trial set up, it has no ethical approval process. So for us, academia is so important to collaborate with because they house the infrastructure and the scientific credibility to run these trials. So without academic partners, like for instance, we're doing a deep brain morphology study response to our multivitamin vitals in menopause. We wouldn't be able to do that without the University of East Anglia's medical school and our amazing collaboration with the team there and the neuroscience team there. There's no way we don't have an MRI scanner at Heights. So, it's they bring the infrastructure and they bring the capacity to actually run the trial. So, every university has its own ethics board that you can submit to and get ethical approval. If you don't get ethical approval, you can't pre-register your trial on clinicaltrials.gov. If you don't pre-register your trials, then you can't publish your trials. Yeah, so it's a very much like a circle where it's also grant applications as well. So a lot of again because they have the infrastructure like BBSRC Innovate UK grants, we can't apply for normally we can't apply for as an individual entity. We'd have to collaborate with an academic institute because they have the infrastructure and facilities. So and we submitted grants with UCL Neuroscience team to look at the impact of a probiotic on cognitive function and brain function in older adults. We've submitted one with Exeter to look at the impact of probiotics on inflammatory states during obesity. There's so much innovative work that you can do with academia. I think the skepticism, you're right, it is there. I think, for Heights and myself, I'm just fortunate that I come from that background where I already hold that trust, which is kind of shown across our collaborator list on our website. There's, we have endless amounts of academic collaborators. So I think for a lot of people in industry, they're probably not trusted because they're not known. And you go to any university, because every university I work with, they do a deep dive on the company as well. So it's not just like all of a sudden we can work with UEA. It's very much like, okay, if you're working with us, we're going to do a deep search. So I had to submit loads and loads of documents to UEA before we're even allowed to start the study because they want to do their due diligence and make sure they're not collaborating with a company that's dodgy or has conflicts of interest and things like that. So yeah, it can be a bit difficult working, collaborating with academia, but it's definitely worth it 100%.
We've spoken in depth previously about GLP-1 medication, and also it seems to be every time anyone asks you to speak on a topic, they always ask you about GLP-1. So I'm going to take my opportunity. Obviously, you've spoken about the role of nutraceuticals and actually how they can play alongside GLP-1 medication rather than competing directly with them. Let's look at it from a positive, but what opportunities excite you most in this area and what concerns you?
100%. I gave a panel talk on this Vita Foods a couple months ago. And I think it was well received because I was just honest to the science. Essentially, my take-home message for any nutraceutical company is like, don't try and compete with the pharmaceuticals. Like we can never, as an industry of nutraceuticals, compete with the pharmaceutical modulation of GLP-1s or GIP or any other hormone, satiety hormone. We can't do it. But like it's just the evidence is just clear. We can't. So I think where we have to be careful and the risk for the industry is for certain companies almost kind of portraying themselves as natural as Ozempic or natural GLP-1 trying to compete with them and positioning themselves as competitors, because you'll never win. And if you do think you'll win, then run an RCT, your nutraceutical versus Ozempic, and see the outcome, which I can get 99% guarantee you it will be in the pharmaceutical grade intervention's favor. But with that being said, I think for us it's one of a very kind of GLP-1 shifting everything, and I think for us it's a very unique position for the nutraceuticals, which I personally haven't seen before, and I don't think when I speak to my colleagues, we actually have a direct line with the pharmaceutical industry to work alongside them for the best of the patients. So for me, it's particularly around the reduction in food intake that we see with these GLP-1s. People reduce about 40% or so on average of food intake when they're on GLP-1s. You're reducing your food intake, you're reducing your nutritional intake. So already a population that has low levels at baseline of micronutrients, you put them on GLP-1s, that deficiency rate is going to exponentially increase as we know, and that is where the nutraceutical industry can work with the pharmaceutical companies, is because if we can work with nutraceuticals whilst the people on these GLP-1s to help optimize and correct these deficiencies that we know they're inevitably going to have, that can also improve, like say, riboflavin is fundamentally important for energy. If you're reducing your food intake, you're more than likely not going to have the energy to go to the gym, or partake in the physical activity interventions that are recommended by the GP or something. So if we can optimize the micronutrient levels, that's good for future disease outcomes, but also may help to underpin like the physical activity and lifestyle interventions that are recommended alongside. So that's one of them. And then GLP-1 modulators as well. Like, there are some really good scientific evidence behind a number of different GLP-1 modulators in the nutraceutical space, not to the extent of pharmaceutical grade, like we're never going to reach that, but there is. So for me, there's a massive bounce back issue at the moment. We're seeing it across like publications in the New England Journal of Medicine, like so many different publications that are coming out, people bouncing back and regaining the weight at a substantial rate post intervention with GLP-1s. And it's like, does the nutraceutical industry has the evidence to perhaps maybe be seen as a follow-on support to the GLP-1s? So once somebody's coming off the GLP-1 medications, they're titrating their dosages, could we put a nutraceutical intervention on top of that to help kind of stimulate that GLP-1 a little bit further, and then slowly wean people off like that, rather than just having to stop and then a massive bounce back in not just weight, but blood pressure, cholesterol, triglycerides all go back up and increase the disease risk again. So yeah, I think two elements for me is nutraceuticals combined with working in collaboration with pharmaceuticals, but one, to look at the micronutrient deficiencies that are going to come, but two, can we play a role in the bounce back that inevitably will come?
Do you think that it's crucial people take a multivitamin alongside GLP-1 from the very beginning? Or do you think those people who are able to balance GLP-1s with, still maintaining somewhat of a nutritious diet and going to the gym, do you think that it's still as crucial for those people, or do you think it should just be sort of given hand in hand?
My own personal opinion on this isn't obviously, this is my own kind of like scientific opinion based on like the literature I've read, is if I was to take GLP-1s, or a family member or a friend was going to take GLP-1s tomorrow, I would 100% recommend they take a multivitamin alongside it, and potentially a probiotic as well, because we know that one of the primary reasons why people discontinue the medication is due to GI symptoms. And there is some evidence now coming out that some specific strains of probiotics may be able to help mitigate those GI issues. So yeah, I personally, I would say, based on the evidence, it's very hard at the moment, even with being able to eat as much as you like, to reach optimal levels of all the different nutrients. And we're seeing that in our national diet survey, with the deficiency levels we stated previously. But if you're then reducing by 40 to 50% your food intake, it's inevitably going to lead to deficiencies somewhere in your diet. So yeah, my own view would be, personally, I would recommend a multivitamin supplement and potentially a probiotic supplement alongside as well, to help with the micronutrients levels, and then also the GI symptoms that may come from the GLP-1s.
Has already built a really impressive research program, and also from clinical trials to parliamentary engagement. What's next for the business, and what excites you most about going to work every day?
What excites me the most is, and what I'm looking forward to the most, is we've built such a foundation of clinical trials at the moment. Quite a few are coming to an end, probably towards the end of this year. Well, I should know this. It's coming to the end of this year. Particularly the urea neuroimaging study, but we also have open label Thrive trial looking at Thrive is our kind of like healthy aging, cellular aging supplement. It's got NAD, CoQ10, transresveratrol and copper. And we're running a trial, open label trial at the moment, looking at nutrient, particularly NAD response, CoQ10 response, and various different biological markers of aging and not mitochondrial function actually, sorry, but biological aging, and obviously mental well-being and cognition and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that finishing up. And then I'm also looking forward to the UA. My favorite one is the UA neuroimaging study. It's such a cool study. And yeah, luckily we can take part in that and drive that study. And then we're working with Manchester Metropolitan University at the moment. We have our hydrate supplement. It's hydration with electrolytes for every day, but it's also got cognizin, which is cytocolin, a highly bioavailable form of choline. And they're running MSc dissertations on them at the moment, and they're going to be looking at cognitive function and hydration status pre and post in healthy students. So it'd be super cool to see whether anything changes there. So the clinical trial pipeline, and then obviously the Parliamentary and Scientific Committee work, super excited for, and I'm really hoping we get a reception over the line in the House of Commons where we can really discuss the issue of micronutrient deficiencies further. Yeah, and just our ongoing collaborations, like we're working with the Nutritional Society at the moment, where we're sponsoring studentships as well. So it'd be nice to see the outcomes of those studentships. And then we have a micronutrient deficiency project with NEDPRO Global Institute with Professor Shimon Ray. That's due to finish in December. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then obviously what I do enjoy is going back to the textbooks and the scientific literature, looking at systematic reviews, meta-analyses of randomized control trials when we're developing new supplements for a specific health outcome. And yeah, there's a couple of health outcomes we're pretty interested in at Heights at the moment, which are continuously evolving. Where we believe that we can have a real impact on these public health issues at the moment through our supplements. So at the moment, we're kind of like in the very beginning stages of this product development. It's super exciting because I love when it's finished and you have the formula and you go back and forth with the manufacturers on whether it can fit. I want to fit everything into one capsule, which obviously you can't. So it's really, I love that, I love like, that's my formula. That's what I really want. And then, talking to them, how do we make this come to life? And then testing that, it's a whole pipeline. I sit down at my desk, I make a formula for a supplement that for a specific health outcome. It gets you back and forth from manufacturers on the capsule sizes and what, realistically people will want to take. And, because people actually have to take it in the real world. And then, getting that out and then getting customer feedback and then designing a study to test it and then publishing the result. Yeah, so that's what I'm really excited for as well.
Amazing. I think, in 5 years' time, when we sit down again, what do you want Harry to have achieved and what would you like Heights to have achieved?
Good question. In 5 years' time, I hope all the foundational work that we've built across Heights, I think, we will probably be seen as the gold standard in nutraceuticals. I'd say within sort of 2 years' time, probably, we'll be probably the people, when they're setting up new nutritional supplement companies, will probably look to Heights and be like, okay, that's the blueprint we want to copy. And that's what I would love, because I had no industry background when I joined Heights. I just came with scientific rigor from academia and clinical research. And I've applied the two fundamental basis of those two separate areas into industry, which historically has notoriously been known for, perhaps not using science in the best way, but applying those two I feel like I've almost generated an amazing formula for supplement companies to follow to show effectiveness of their supplements, to develop effective supplements, show the effectiveness of the supplements. So I'd hope, that would be the case where, Heights is seen as the go-to gold standard in the nutraceutical industry of how to conduct your science and research effectively and efficaciously and ethically. But then also just to be able to sit back and say, myself as an academic and scientist, but then Heights as a first time as an industry partner has engaged the government and politicians so much. We've probably annoyed them so much with our messaging of the importance of nutrition and population health, fingers crossed 100%, that, we have had a real world impact where we have actually influenced policy around, say, fortification of riboflavin, which is then fed down into the food system. And we're seeing improvements in our population survey of riboflavin levels, which then we can extrapolate to say, well, actually, this could have, by modeling, prevented X amount of disease. That's really the massive halo of a goal for us at Heights, and for me personally, is showing that real world impact through influencing government policy at the highest level, and really just keep driving that and banging that drum as loud as we can to hopefully give nutrition the respect it deserves within Parliament.
No, I love that. And Before we end today, I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions of your personal opinions about supplements and etc. So this is your own opinions, quick fire questions. What is the best supplement everybody should know about?
I'm completely biased on this. If it was within
That's okay.
one supplement, it would be our multivitamin Vitals, just because it's such a diverse supplement. It has 20 different compounds, nutritional compounds within it. It's simply 2 capsules a day. So in my experience, one of the reasons why nutritional supplementation fails is because people just don't take it. It gets stuck at the back of somebody's kitchen cupboard and never gets used again. Vitals was designed to look pretty, and simply just 2 capsules a day covers that. But also, it's not just how it looks and the compounds in it, but it's the clinical trial effectiveness, the efficaciousness of it, which we've shown in a pharmaceutical grade RCT. So I take it every day, and my family and friends, quite a lot of them are on it as well. Just I think it's such a effective all round multivitamin to keep your biomarkers and your nutrient levels and the knock on effect of like your homocysteine levels, which are really important as well, in check. So yeah, no, I'm biased, but I 100% would say like
What's the most underrated vitamin or mineral in the industry?
riboflavin. I have to be honest. It's not just because my PhD was really focused on that on that nutrient quite a lot, and I've published quite a lot of research on it. It is just such a widely overlooked vitamin. Riboflavin, vitamin B2. It's because it's so overlooked, and people don't even realize they're deficient. If you're not taking enough dairy, the primary food source of riboflavin is dairy. If you're not taking enough dairy in your food, which a lot of people have now transitioned from dairy to plant-based produce instead and animal-based, then you're likely to have low suboptimal deficient status of riboflavin, and this can have a massive, yes, involved in iron metabolism. It's linked to energy metabolism, activation of such key different nutrients like folate and B6. It's just a powerhouse nutrient, and it's so widely overlooked. So that is, my most underrated nutrient is riboflavin, vitamin B2. If you Google me and riboflavin, you'll see my research. You see why I'm so passionate.
Take a look. I'll absolutely take a look because I didn't know that. So that is super interesting. What one supplement category are people wasting too much money on?
That's a really good one. What one supplement company? I would probably say like just random marketing and TikTok. I don't have social media, but TikTok, Instagram, you know, that's why they're quite old school like that. But yeah, I'd say like these just random trend. I see them. I say I'm at the pub with my friends having a drink, and one of them's like, "Oh my god, have you seen this new supplement?" And it's like some herb from somewhere that I
Yeah, yeah.
personally I've never even
Never
heard
heard
of.
of. Yeah.
And then I do a background dive into the research, and it's like there's literally no clinical trial evidence whatsoever to support this, even if it's safe. I don't even know. And he's they're
Yeah.
shopping on like certain websites. I don't know if I can say them. So certain websites they're
That's
shopping
okay.
on, and it's like that is one thing that I think is a waste of money. Is until there's clinical trial evidence on things on these different compounds, like why are we trusting it based on influencers, suggesting that improved her skin health, that N equals one study of you know consumer, almost like a consumer perception study. It just doesn't make sense. It's for me, it's that kind of just jumping on a trend of like this random herb that's like trending, and that's where I think kind of like a lot of consumers may be wasting their money.
If I was a consumer that didn't know anything about dietary supplement industry, I didn't really understand clinical trials, and actually I wasn't on social media, so I didn't fully understand the marketing led aspect. If I was to go into a department store and buy a supplement, what do I need to look out for when buying a supplement? How do I differentiate?
It is really difficult. And even like when I'm a scientist, so much experienced scientist before I joined Heights. And when you're looking at different websites, and it's hard to actually find, like to disentangle what's real and what's fake, because some marketing is actually very good, dressing up science, very poor science as if it's like gold standard clinical trials, which obviously it's not. So for me, it's like, this is what I say to my friends: if you just take a photo of it and set at the back and say, like, particularly if you're in Boots, you're looking for a multivitamin, if you go and have a look and it's like, if it's full of like fillers, so like some things you won't even be able to like pronunciate, and I wouldn't even know what they are, but they're non-undoubtedly like fillers, or basically just in the capsule to fill the capsule out. There are no actives, there's no need for it to actually be in there. So looking for like that kind of like standout, like weird things you can't pronounce. And then like forms as well. So, like B6 can come in various different forms. If you try and look for like what referred to as most bioavailable, you can actually probably nowadays take a photo and just put it in ChatGPT and ask, are these bioavailable forms? Like B6, you want pyridoxal 5-phosphate, PLP, it's the metabolically active form of B6. For folate, you want 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate or 5-MTHF. It's the metabolically active form of folate that's going to be effective. Then also just Google them, or go on to a website called PubMed.com and Google, see if is there any clinical trials on, or trial any data on this supplement as well. So yeah, dosages and is there any trial evidence?
What's one thing that you would like to see disappear from the supplement industry?
Something I would say is like more rigorous focus on marketing as well. So, as a scientist, it's important that the marketing portrays the science, and the science is done independently of marketing. So that's one thing I think I'd like to see disappear. And then, like jumping on trends of various different nutritional compounds that have no efficacy data and actually probably no safety data, and people putting it into a capsule and then just selling it to the population, because the regulations around the nutraceutical industry at the moment are not very strict.
Sure. And finally, one other company in the industry that you admire.
It's a little bit aside, just because I've been doing quite a bit of work with them, but I really like Thriver, the home blood testing company. I've had a couple of meetings with their CEO, and I really, really like them in the sense of they're giving people the power to monitor their own nutritional status without obviously at the moment going to the GP and, waiting and then are requesting like a nutrient. Might not even run it for you. Whereas they're actually, I went through their whole kind of like consumer thing cycle, and I was really impressed with the way in which they actually do the bloods and take the bloods and actually report them in a very transparent way, and the amount they offer. So it's very easy now for consumers just to be like, okay, I've read this paper, like I don't think I get enough, folate in my diet and like green leafy veg. I want to test it. And you can go and get that blood test. I just think it's actually quite remarkable, home testing. And so yeah, for me, it'd probably be actually like a company like Thriver that, give people the power to take their health into their own hands without having to rely on the NHS at the moment.
Harry, thank you so much for joining me today. And it's been brilliant conversation. And I think you've given everyone a real insight into why science and transparency and collaboration are so important for the future of the nutraceutical industry. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow Tablet Tuesday on Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you never miss an episode. And if there's a guest or topic you'd love me to cover, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Tablet Tuesday.